the report that was declassified and released yesterday by Director Gabbard, which is the House, it's the House Oversight Committee, the intelligence, it's called HIPSY. That's the language everybody uses. The HIPSY report that was published in 2020, it was classified, declassified. Anybody who reads that, look, it's 44 pages. It's extremely well written. And in fact, when you, because, good intelligence products are like a pleasure to read. You're reading them and you're like, it's exciting almost, because you realize, it's like even like a great book. Well, so you realize when you're reading something true, if you read the original intelligence community assessment of Russian interference in 2017, and then go read that 44-page HIPSY report, it is clear as daylight that they deliberately manipulated this intelligence to create the opposite perception of what was true. And Sean, there's things in there, because I had reported on this report last year with Matt Taibbi and Alex Gutentag. We sat down yesterday reading it, and we were like, holy smokes. Like, we didn't have any idea first of all, how good it was as a debunking of it. But there was the thing that they revealed in there was that the Russians had all of this dirt on Hillary that made her look terrible, and they didn't use it.
All right, guys, what a week it has been. Epstein, DNI, big trade deals. But you know what? It's Friday. You're in for a treat. Michael Shellenberger is coming right up to break it all down. I know you guys have been excited all week as I've been dropping that in the chat. Thank you for everyone who's joining us during the premiere here at 6 o'clock. Always have fun engaging with you guys. But it's a big week, and he is going to bring it. Next week, by the way, some big guests. Robert Cahaley. We've got a lot coming your way. So always hit that subscribe button. Hit the notification button so you get pinged when the show starts and premieres at 6. And by the way, you can always go to my newsletter, SeanSpicer.com. Brand new column dropping today that I think you'll be interested in. And a little Friday shout out for you. Janar693, a great comment yesterday. Best information and breakdown I've seen in any news or podcast. That was the John Solomon show. I agree with you. I think you're going to like this one too. Don't worry. And tell your friends, ask them to leave reviews. But even if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, do me a favor, go over to Apple and Spotify and just give us a 5-star review. Those help us so much. So appreciate that. And by the way, we've always got a great weekend rant for those of you on YouTube. So that's why you got to hit that subscribe and notification button. Before I bring in Michael Shellenberger, though, real quick, it is the weekend. You know what I'm doing. You guys know me well enough. I'm grilling and making omelets and eggs in the morning. And when I grill, it's going to be the Riverbend Ranch steaks. I have been killing this every weekend. I love these things. I've had the strip, the ribeye, the filet medallions, the little medallions, the steak tips. I've even had the beef jerky. The hot dogs, by the way, American. Of course they're American. Amazing. Another A word. I'm not kidding you. My kids loved them. I thought they were the best I've ever had, and I like a good hot dog. I'm just going to tell you. Every single person said, where did you get these steaks? You cannot get them in a grocery store. You can't get them in a steakhouse, because I've dined on a lot of people's expense accounts, and I'll tell you that right now. It's all raised here in the United States. No growth hormones, no artificial antibiotics, or any of that crap that you get in a lot of stuff. This stuff is amazing. Over 35 years, Riverbend Ranch has made the best steaks. Tenderness, marbleness that you will see nowhere else. Every single bite is unbelievable. And the magic doesn't stop then. These are steaks, and all their products are aged for a minimum of 21 days. When you taste it, you will know exactly what I am talking about. It is ranch to table. Montana and Wyoming ranches, none of that artificial stuff, shipped directly to your home. You order directly. Riverbendranch.com. Use promo code Sean for $20 off your first order. Riverbendranch.com, code word Sean. I highly recommend the packages, by the way. The Cowboy, I think, is the one that I'm subscribed to now. Check it out. By the way, that's great steak. You know who's great people? Leo Grillo, my buddy out there from Delta Rescue. I'm not kidding you. He rescued a Doberman years ago, named the dog Delta. That stands for Dedication to Everlasting Love to Animals. That was the basis for forming Delta Rescue. And if you go to deltarescue.org, check out the videos. It's the world's largest no-kill sanctuary. Thank you, Leo Grillo, for reminding me. It's not a shelter. They're not looking to adopt, but it's got dogs, cats, horses, you name it, abused, neglected, malnutrition. They get the care they need and support they need lead for life. But it's only because of people like you. No big government grants. I made a personal donation to Leo Grillo and the folks at Delta Rescue by going to deltarescue.org, and I would ask for your consideration, please. Make a donation, help the great work of the folks out there. And also, if you want, click on that link when you go to deltarescue.org, the estate planning kit. You might have an old 401k or stock that you can get a tax benefit by talking to your tax professional now, or to help make this an enduring mission going forward. Generational. I want it to keep going. I love what Leo Grillo. Go to deltarescue.org to see what I'm talking about. All right, without further ado, the chair of politics at the University of Austin, who is running a great newsletter at public.news. It's amazing work. He was one of the leaders in exposing the Twitter files, Mr. Michael Shellenberger. Michael, thanks for being here. I know the audience is excited, and I'm a big fan of your work, and so I'm excited for this conversation. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Sean. Looking forward to it.
So, you know, it was interesting. Yesterday on the show, on Thursdays, have a panel discussion, and out of nowhere, we started talking about how to deal with the Epstein issue, how the Trump campaign could deal with it, because it just won't go away. And part of my issue or my suggestion was get it all out there. They've tried different iterations, but maybe put a press conference together, have Pam Bondi, Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, Harmeet Dillon, Ed Martin, whatever. Get everybody in one place and say, look, here's what we have, here's what we don't have. And Larry O'Connor was on the panel yesterday, and he said, you know, we should do a Twitter file dump the way that, like, Michael Shellenberger covered that instance where Elon got together these credible individuals, put it all out there, let them kind of take a shot. And I thought to myself, wow, I'm going to have him on tomorrow, so let me get his take. So one, tactically speaking, as a guy who went through that process, since Larry O'Connor name-checked you, would you think that is a good idea, whether you were one of the folks who got to do it again or not? But, like, tactically speaking, was that a good idea?
Oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, of course, I want huge transparency, and Article 2 of the Constitution requires that transparency be provided to Congress. Congress is being denied its ability to do proper oversight over the intelligence community, and not.
Well, no, I'm sorry. This is just the Epstein for now. I want to get to the DNI part, but with Epstein, because I do want to get your take on that too. But if we can just lead into this with the Epstein issue. Let's start with that.
Yeah, I mean, look, we would love access to all of the Epstein files. There were, according to the Attorney General, there's a truckload of them. They just leaked yesterday. I'm sure you saw that, or I'm not sure when it was, but maybe within the last 24 hours, that the president is in the files. That was something that sort of we had all kind of suspected, but it hadn't been confirmed. They also said that the Attorney General had briefed the president about this. So obviously there's just a lot of people in the files. There's a lot of people that probably don't want the files to come out for that reason. The current FBI director said as much in the late 2023, that the reason Congress wasn't releasing the files when it had the opportunity to was because too many people in Congress and their supporters are in it. So yeah, we would love to do an Epstein files. We just need the files.
Okay, but so let me play the devil's advocate piece of this, because this is what the other folks would say. The opponents would say, well, one, there's a lot of child porn and inappropriate material. There's people's names who haven't been charged with anything, and they have a right to due process. There are victim statements who probably don't want their story told because they've chose to hide themselves in a lot of this grand jury stuff. So argue from the other standpoint for a second. All that being said, if the government says, yeah, well, we can't release this stuff, what's your response to that?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't think anybody is clamoring for child pornography to be released. Right. What people want released is information about criminal activities. I mean, to the extent to which if there's child exploitation videos, obviously that would implicate whoever has them. But obviously, this was a scheme that went beyond just, Jeffrey Epstein's own personal perversions. Most people that look at this point, whether they're conservative or liberal, think that this is a sex blackmail operation that involved the intelligence community. It's not a conspiracy theory. There's just too many, the relationship between Ghislaine Maxwell and her father, Epstein's relationship to the intelligence community, the fact that the CIA director under Biden was at Epstein's house multiple times. That's not great. And the CIA, as many people know, it has a long track record and the FBI of running sex blackmail operations, something according to Whitney Webb, they learned from the mafia. So I think that there's obviously nobody. I mean, we're all against sex trafficking and pedophilia. That there's a whole program to crack down on this. The Epstein case is significant because it appears to involve the intelligence community engaged in nefarious activities. We know the U.S. Justice that gave the sweetheart deal to President Trump to Jeffrey Epstein. He said that he had to give him that sweetheart deal because Epstein belonged to intelligence. So, that's the big issue here. I mean, do they have to release everything? Obviously, if people, were not doing illegal things, I think there's some discretion there. We do need more transparency. I don't think that simply, the legal proceedings are sufficient. We know they're sitting on truckloads of evidence. They need to err on the side of more, not less.
Okay, so based on your experience with how the Twitter files were handled, right? That's a private company. Elon has every right to do what he wants with those. And what you just described, right? We know that there's a lot. If Pam Bondi or President Trump or his team called you and said, Michael, you were involved in this release of Twitter files, and that seemed to go well. I don't know that we can do all that, but what would you suggest we do to finally get over the hump that we're at right now? What would you describe to them within the context of what's possible, knowing what we just discussed in terms of what's appropriate or not? How could they restore the level of trust that I think is missing right now?
Well, there's a lot that they should be doing. I think it's also important to understand that, the context is that we weren't getting a lot of transparency and disclosure, much less intelligence community reform before the Epstein files. So if it had been the situation where we feel like, for example, CIA hasn't cleaned house, they still have the people that wrote this really fraudulent intelligence community assessment about Russian interference in the 2016 elections, those people are still at CIA. We haven't seen church committee type hearings like we had in 1975 that led to intelligence community reform. It just appears the Trump administration is happy to just take over the intelligence community, I should say, with some important exceptions, such as the DNI Tulsi Gabbard releasing more documents. But the Epstein, it's like in some ways it was the straw that broke the camel's back, because we haven't really gotten any of the transparency or reform of the intelligence community that we wanted. Now, I will say just, the Twitter files was such an extraordinary thing because literally there were no limits placed on what we could get. He is really a wild man in terms of everything, including transparency. We were able to just get whatever we wanted. If they were to invite me in and say, look, you can come in, but we're not necessarily going to let you release things, of course, I would say, yeah, I want to go in there. And then I think it's just a question. Like, if you look at something and you're like, look, the public really needs to know this, the administration's like, you can't release it, I'd probably just be like, okay, I can't participate anymore, because I don't want to. If you misrepresent the documentation, then you are potentially participating in government misinformation. I'd rather them know that they're hiding those secrets than participate in some sort of strategic release of documents that would leave people with the wrong impression.
Yeah. So this is where, again, I kind of am like a little bit of everything, right? So whether it's inviting people in as they did with Twitter or having a press conference, my thought is this: you go out and you go, okay, guys, look, here are the documents. These documents over here are inappropriate child porn, unconsensual activity. Like, we cannot show. Okay, so here's pile one. Pile two is victim statements. Pile three is this, and then here's what we can show you. I think what's missing is that they're just saying it doesn't exist, and we know it exists, but I want, to your point, like, let some people in and go, yeah, I saw it. It's gross, it's bad. I agree that because it's inappropriate and sexual in nature or involving minors, I can tell you it exists, and I can tell you it's not there, but they're not allowing a deeper understanding. They're just saying, take our word for it, and based on everything else, as you alluded to, no one has a degree of trust that that's what's actually happening. And that's why I believe they need to open up the hood a little to say, hey, I can't necessarily give you this, but I want to show you the kind of things that I'm talking about. When I say it's gross, this is what I'm saying. You can't report on it, but I'm going to show you it exists. That's where I think they would win back a lot of trust, is that people would go, I get it. It was gross. It's inappropriate. I agreed not to report on it, but they're not lying when they say that that's 70% of what we have. And another 20 is victim statements. They're right. They're there. And I realize legally for a million reasons that we can't release them. But then there's these other documents. But they're trying to pretend, and this is where I think you can't be transparent on a bunch of things and then not here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you're asking a really interesting question, which is sort of like, how do you serve the public interest in this case, and where might you need to protect private interests? I think that it's important to remember that the Attorney General only suggested that really what they were looking at was just Jeffrey Epstein's private porn collection in very recently. Before that, she had said there was truckloads of information, the files are on my desk. There
Right.
was no sense in which we were just talking about one guy's laptop. That's absurd. We have all these reports of FBI coming out of there with multiple CDs of photographs and video evidence. I would say this, I think that a lot of people will disagree with me, on it. But I think that the public's interest is in really understanding the role of the intelligence community, and that there's a lot of, we know that in the Epstein case, there's a lot of disagreement about, obviously people have made claims often to potentially get a financial settlement that we don't think were true, and I don't want to cast aspersions on anybody, but, Alan Dershowitz says he was falsely accused, for example, and I have no evidence to the contrary. I don't think anybody does. I would be happy to, and again, I think people are not going to like this. I would just bracket all that. Like I would go, okay, fine. We're not going to mess with the people that were potentially entrapped by any of this. But if the intelligence community is engaged in sex blackmail, that is extremely serious and needs to stop. I just think like we don't want to do torture, for a variety of reasons. We put limits on what our intelligence community does. They should not be doing sex blackmail operations. We need to know that that will never happen again, much less happening with you could argue that there may be a case in some situations in different parts of the world, certainly not in the United States of America, certainly not in Manhattan. That's just insane.
Yeah, this is where I think this issue is different, and I think you've put your finger on it. That it allowing people to see underneath the tent isn't just like here are all the Epstein files. There are things that we probably don't want people to know about how our government operated with respect to Epstein. And by revealing this, you're going to show a lot of stuff that people are going to be outraged because it's going to ask further questions. Are you still doing it? All the things that you just said, Michael. The immediate question is when did this stop? Are all of these people culpable in some way and going to be punished? And I don't think that there's a lot of people that want that released.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, totally. I mean, if you just to affirm that, just go watch Bill Gates' interview with PBS, where when he's asked about Epstein, he goes, well, he's dead now. And it's really quite disturbing to see that kind of the way he talks about it. I think there's some very powerful people there with Epstein. Obviously, there's some very powerful people that clearly did not engage in any sexual activity. I mean, Stephen Hawking, for example, is like disabled. Like, there's no reason to think there was something there. I certainly know other people that had been interacting with Epstein who I'm confident there was no, pedophilia or nasty business. Epstein touched a lot of different people, was in a lot of different circles, but it's really this role of the intelligence community. And that's why I know you don't want to expand the conversation yet, but I do think.
No, I do. Please expand.
I would just say I would be much more, and again, people might disagree. I mean, I've personally pulled, a teenage girl off the street who was being sex trafficked through my journalism in San Francisco. We reported on the grooming gangs in Britain. I'm 100% advocate of cracking down on that. I just think with this particular thing, I would prioritize cleaning up the intelligence community rather than re-prosecuting and re-investigating a bunch of people that got sucked into Epstein's orbit, because that's really what I'm concerned about now, is that we have an intelligence community that remains unreformed. And in terms of like what's in the public interest, we need an intelligence community that the American people can trust to not abuse its powers. Anybody that reads the great books that have been written on the CIA and the FBI over the last 80 years knows that they engage in some extremely bad behavior. And that the worst of those behaviors came to light in 1975 during the Congressional Church Committee hearings that led to a number of important reforms. We are 50 years in the future from that. We need a similar cleaning of house because there's mafia engagement. I mean, the use of criminal gangs. I mean, this is not controversial. That's just a big part of what the CIA has done. Bribery, sex blackmail operations. These are not theories. These are like well established in the history of our intelligence agencies. And look, I think that Americans, we want to be kept safe. We know that it's a dark and dirty intelligence business, that there's going to be some, we got to manage a huge global empire. I mean, we're obviously policing all these, America has an outsized role. We understand that we need a significant intelligence and security state. So I'm not even proposing anything radical, but you need to clean house. And I think President Trump needs to understand that he needs to clean house, and that actually, if they want to put Epstein behind them, and again, I'm not suggesting that they should drop it. I really will also always be demanding Epstein transparency. But if I had to be like, look, one thing to come out of that would be intelligence community reform, because if we can't get transparency on Epstein, we should get transparency on as many other things as we can. And at the end of the day, we need to know that they've cleaned house and these bad actors are no longer there, and that the heads of these intelligence agencies and the ethic in the institutions is not to engage in these kinds of activities that we've seen them engage in so often in the past.
You've been around this for so long. Let me just play a scenario out for you and tell me, let's say that this is all true, right? Meaning that there are bad and nefarious people that supported or were aware of, or whatever, whether it's Epstein or whatever, bad people in the intelligence. So let's just, for the sake of argument, agree that occurred. Let's say I'm Tulsi Gabbard, and I go, Mr. President, I've reviewed these files that you've asked. I got to be honest with you. The intelligence community has done some pretty bad things. Now, remember, Epstein did bad things up until at least, 2010, something like that. So a lot of those people are potentially still in government, okay? If you're Gabbard and you come to the president and say, Mr. President, we're going to clean house, and all these people are in it. Now, play this out for 1 second. All of these people who have been involved, maybe some of them were ordered to do it, maybe they did it on their own, I don't know. Don't you think those people are then going to go up the chain and say, I tell you what, Tulsi, you roll on me and say that I did this stuff, or I was, I allowed it to happen, or I was complicit, or whatever. You know what I know? I know this other bad stuff that happened, and I got some stuff on you. And I'm going to just blow the whistle on everything, and the whole house of cards is going to come down. Michael, based on your reporting and history of looking at all this, what I just presented to you, is that at all a possible scenario?
Yes, I think that's the likeliest scenario that I can't.
Well, doesn't this make sense then? Michael, this is what worries me, though, is that this is they basically go, you brought up the mafia and all this stuff, and it goes, oh yeah, you rat on me, Joey? I'm going to tell all the cops that I have in my back pocket, the mayor, I got the mayor, and da-da-da-da. And this is where I worry that why this instance is such an outlier is what you're actually saying, is that there's a lot of people that are saying, you come after me, I'm coming after you, and I'm coming after him, and I'm coming after her, and the whole thing's getting burned down.
Yeah, look, I think that if the Democrats, you have to ask, if Trump is in the Epstein files in a really bad way, why would the Democrats not use that when Biden was in power? And kind of the obvious answer is because that would have knocked that. I think that your language of a house of cards potentially points to, which is just that there are people in those files on both Democrat and Republican sides. And I think this is why, in some ways, this issue is a bipartisan issue. But the left, I think, in the last few days, finally being oh, maybe there's an opportunity for here to go after Trump. It took them a while because they had spent so many years saying that Epstein was a conspiracy theory, and now they're oh, really, we need transparency. So, like I said, I think that may very well be the case, and I have very low expectations of what my opinion, of whatever opinion I will have on the Trump administration. But to the extent to which, if I were putting myself in their position, and if Epstein were, something that really they weren't going to go there, and it sure looks like that, I'd have I have very low expectations of whatever it is they say they're going to put out, and I don't think it's going to satisfy many people. I would do all this other stuff. It's if the Epstein thing were happening in a vacuum, and they were firing bad actors out of the Central Intelligence Agency. They were announcing that they were not going to do sex blackmail operations ever again, or that they were going to crack down on sex blackmail operations, that they weren't going to, but we have this is an agency that got, particularly CIA, because we kind of go intelligence community, but look, the CIA is, kind of first among equals. I mean, they're not even equals, but a distant second place. CIA, look, they fraudulent intelligence that led to the invasion of Iraq. That's just shockingly bad. Torture overseen by the CIA. And then we now have this, we now know that the entire Russiagate was not just like an exaggeration or playing up some information. It was kind of fabricated whole cloth, apparently, as a projection and defense mechanism, because the Hillary campaign was concerned with Trump using her close ties to Russia against her. And now we have this overwhelming amount of evidence that the former CIA director really just completely fabricated the Russiagate hoax whole cloth, involves the FBI. We don't know. I mean, Obama obviously is ultimately responsible, and he's the person that the president and the director of national intelligence have been focused on. But, look, Trump controls the CIA. Ratcliffe was a good actor in the first Trump administration. Where's the cleaning of house? Where's the reforms? Like, we're not seeing any of it, and we're not seeing the president even call for that. And, look, I think I'm not going to say that was a huge part of the reason Trump was elected, but certainly I think there was a lot of Americans that were quite concerned about the abuses of power by the intelligence community. And kind of for the first time, at least in the last 80 years, you saw, at least as many, Republicans, if not more Republicans than Democrats, concerned about the weaponization of the intelligence community and the so-called deep state. On Russiagate, Hunter Biden, COVID origins, like what were they doing, in that biolab in China? We know that it was also, these things are all dual use, and that it was also to protect against bioweapons. So where are we at, guys? Like, we just haven't seen it. We did see some good document released by Tulsi Gabbard this week, but I just think they are not, I would give them a 5 at best out of 10 on transparency. And at this point, frankly, maybe a 1 or 2 on intelligence community reform, just because of Tulsi Gabbard. She's the only, really the person in the administration that was most committed to reform, and is obviously somebody that came from outside the Republican Party, and I think carries that torch. But Ratcliffe has got to be a part of that reform, and the president's got to be demanding it.
Okay, you talk about the reform, cleaning house. You guys had this exclusive, and I just want to read this for folks. Intelligence analyst who authored fraudulent Russiagate report is still at CIA, sources say. This is your reporting. Number one, I was shocked that it didn't get more attention. Number two, to your bigger and broader point about reforms, no kidding, they're not cleaning. It's like, hey, I just really screwed up bad and tried to influence a presidential election. And it's like someone's like, all right, no coffee break for you today, but you've learned your lesson. Like, I read this piece that you guys put out, Michael, and I was like, what?
It's crazy. I mean, what other business could you be in where you commit fraud and you not only keep your job, but almost certainly were promoted? That's what's happened at the CIA. And that's not from a single source. That's multiple sources. And I suspect I'm in conversation with the CIA. They're supposed to get me a response to this. I have engaged with them, but I don't think they're going to provide me with any evidence showing that they have, in fact, fired any of these people. So, yeah, I mean, we're talking about, and I have the name of the lead author, and we'll see what the CIA says about that. I've certainly talked to some people on background that insist that there was no lead author, but nonetheless, these are people that I don't think John Brennan was at his computer typing that travesty, which really I think fairly has been called the worst intelligence, manipulation. You wouldn't even call it a failure. It's really an intelligence weaponization and politicization and manipulation. Hasn't been that bad since weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, or really since torture. So, this is not, that was 20 years ago, so we are just still not seeing that. We have unaccountable bureaucrats who, and if your intelligence agencies can be, so you can kind of say, oh, and everyone's trying to just blame Brennan, of course, that's very convenient. But if just one guy, so then like the intelligence community can just be completely, manipulated by one guy. You need a culture where people, to use one expression, knock over the pitcher of water on their way out the room when people talk about fraud. I mean, that's the rule in, like, if you want to like stay out of prison and in the corporate world, if someone starts talking about fraud and committing crimes in the boardroom, you get up and knock down a pitcher of water and be like, I'm out of here. So the people need to be held accountable. And I don't know why they're still at CIA. and I hopefully will get an answer from them. But I am seriously considering publishing the person's name because if there's no accountability, then I think it falls on journalists and civil society to try to hold our leaders and our institutions to account.
I want to get to Brennan and the higher ups in a second, but I want to stay on this person who wrote this report. As far as you know, was it intentional? Like, did they actually intend to do something to harm President Trump or benefit Hillary Clinton? Or were they bad at their job?
No, and that's actually, I'm so glad you asked that, Sean. That is, yes, thank you for going there. So now, just as context for your viewers, CIA came out with a pretty good evaluation of this intelligence community assessment, again from January 2017 on Russian interference in the 2016 election. They did their own self-critique that they published, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. And it was okay, but if you read it, it really started to suggest that there was sort of like a process problem. They emphasized it was kind of rushed, that CIA kind of, if they had just sort of slowed down a little bit more. No, like the report that was declassified and released yesterday by Director Gabbard, which is the House, it's the House Oversight Committee, the intelligence, it's called HIPSY. That's the language everybody uses. The HIPSY report that was published in 2020, it was classified, declassified. Anybody who reads that, look, it's 44 pages. It's extremely well written. And in fact, when you, because, good intelligence products are like a pleasure to read. You're reading them and you're like, it's exciting almost because you realize, it's like even like a great book. Well, so you realize when you're reading something true, if you read the original intelligence community assessment of Russian interference in 2017, and then go read that 44-page HIPSY report, it is clear as daylight that they deliberately manipulated this intelligence to create the opposite perception of what was true. And Sean, there's things in there, because I had reported on this report last year with Matt Taibbi and Alex Gutentag. We sat down yesterday reading it and we were like, holy smokes. Like, we didn't have any idea first of all, how good it was as a debunking of it. But there was the thing that they revealed in there was that the Russians had all of this dirt on Hillary that made her look terrible, and they didn't use it. Well, so if they wanted to hurt Hillary, why didn't they use it before the election? That's the most damning thing. Whereas like on Trump, it was they had so little. They had to go make up the Steele dossier with these crazy lies.
Well, basically. Can I add a piece that's interesting on this? There's two pieces of this that I'm personally aware of. Number one, I was personally, as well as some other senior officials at the RNC, brought to the DHS headquarters on Nebraska Avenue. At the time, that's where it was. And briefed by senior DHS officials that said, will you guys go out and instill confidence in the election? Because now, to add context to this, there was this belief that if Trump lost, he was going to say the election was hacked. So they came to us and said, can you come to this briefing at DHS? And they sat down and said, we have this disparate election system, right? If you vote in Akron, Ohio, and you vote in Arkansas and, in Little Rock, there's two different systems. You could never hack the system. And they said, we need you guys. We can tell you it's safe. Nothing's going to happen. We need you as senior Republican officials to go out and say that can't happen. And we were like, what are you doing here? And it didn't take that long for us to realize they were trying to use us because they thought Hillary would win. So that's number one. Number two is, with respect to the whole Annex A and everything, I was in the room with Comey. I watched him brief Trump. It is not what the media portrayed was happening, right? And so there is this sense that to your point. And I forgot, the third big thing is this. Everyone keeps talking about the hacks of the DNC and putting out all those emails. And someone says, well, they didn't go after you guys. They did. Our IT department, it was unbelievable. We didn't say it publicly at the time. They were coming after us like Banshee. And the difference is that we had put up, hat tip to our IT guys. They were coming to me saying, hey, we're getting hacked. They were in conversation with the FBI. They were just actually smart and good at what they did and blocked them. So what is missing in this whole discussion is the fact that they were trying to get dirt on Trump. They were trying to get our emails. They were trying to do this. They just got blocked from getting it. And they got all the DNC stuff. That's not that they would have probably put out more on Trump if they could have gotten it.
Well, and not only that, but like, didn't John? I mean, John Podesta, they fished him, right? I mean,
Right.
like, in other words, like they. For those who don't know, phishing is when you probably most people probably get them. If someone sends you an email and they go, "Oh, come to this website because you have to fix your password," and then you go to some fake website, you type in your password, they know your password, and they just. I mean, it's the simplest. What do they call
Saudi
that? It's
prince
like,
giving you money all the
yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah. It's like the simplest. What do they call that? It's like a social hack or something. But yeah, I mean, so it's like that whole sophisticated. So we don't really. The other thing is we don't really know. And I think this was that there's so much dishonesty in that intelligence community assessment on Russian interference. Another one was just that FBI and NSA said that they had low confidence that it was the Russians who hacked the DNC. They said it was low confidence. Well, you get to the ICA, suddenly they say, oh, the whole ICA has high confidence. Really, like the top agency on signals intelligence and the main intelligence agency that does domestic are both saying low intelligence. And then the firm that did it, CrowdStrike, is obviously this Democrat, consulting firm. So the whole thing is like normally like when you do disinformation, like the rule of disinformation and propaganda is that it should have like a seed of truth. Like in this case, it was like the opposite. It was like Hillary. I mean, it was Bill Clinton goes to Russia, gets $500,000 for a speech, and Hillary approves the uranium purchases as State Department. I mean, we know that they were worried that Trump was going to attack Hillary as conflicted by the Clinton Foundation relationship to Russia. So it looks as though, and this is what Bill Barr concludes, the former Attorney General, in his biography, is he says it was a dirty campaign trick by the Hillary campaign that basically CIA and FBI pick up and run with. That's what it looks like. Now, maybe there was some different origin of it, but that's basically, appears to be what happened. And that's a massive, I just think we should like really posit how significant of a violation of the law that is.
Yeah.
Our intelligence agencies are not supposed to interfere in politics. Like it shouldn't have to be said, but it's just really outrageous that they would be. And in part because the CIA, and this is, we forget about it because we always think of them as like, just spying or maybe as like military, kinetic action with SEALs. But the CIA originally is a political action body. Its job is to influence elections. The first most significant thing it does is it influences the 1947 elections in Italy. It was after that that George Kennan, the great State Department containment strategist, said we have to use information warfare. We have to engage in political warfare, not just military action, because of course it's easier to just overthrow the government with propaganda, protests, and military coups. But like the fact that this was the CIA that had been doing regime change and government overthrows for 80 years, then doing it against a domestic American president, I mean, that is a high crime. There's no other way to describe
By
it.
the way, you know what this sounds like? Remember during COVID, everyone's like, I don't know how you could possibly blame China for this, like these theories. And I'm like, Jon Stewart was the guy that did that viral clip, but it's like,
Yeah.
really? Because there's a coronavirus lab in Wuhan where
Yeah.
it came from. And it's kind of like when you say that, like the whole Russia thing, it's like, really? Because Bill Clinton gets $500,000, uranium gets approved by his wife right after that. God, there's no possible way there's a connection. And here we are again with the CIA, that it's like origins are in influencing an election, going, you think it's possible that they were influencing an election when literally that's what they were founded to do?
It's amazing.
I want to ask you, though, two follow-up questions. Okay, so we established through your reporting about this employee that's still there and, to your point, what you believe their motives are. That being said, Tulsi says at this White House briefing earlier this week that Barack Obama and Brennan, et cetera, knew. Okay, so from what you know, right, are they culpable in this, or is this, can they claim, hey, look, the employee did bad stuff, we didn't know that?
Oh, I mean, I thought you were going to ask me what we know about Obama's relationship. I mean, we
Go for it. Go wherever
well,
you
we
want with
didn't.
it.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, first of all, I'm very grateful to the director and the president and everybody for all these releases. I applaud them, et cetera, et cetera. Really, we already knew that President Obama was involved in this, that he had that meeting. Now, they did release the list of people in that, I think it was December 9th, 2016 meeting where they task out the ICA. But it wasn't like we got a lot more information on Obama's particular role. it's often with these things, you're like, the really interesting parts of it are the stuff that's not quite as headline grabbing, but really moves the story forward. One of them is like, literally consider this: on December 9th, the day that Obama has his entire national security and intelligence cabinet meeting to assign the projects of the ICA, somebody, and many people speculate Ben Rhodes, and I have not proven that, but sounds right given his relationship to the media. Somebody was, and by the way, the Washington Post and the New York Times both say multiple people. They go and tell the Washington Post and New York Times that the Russians interfered to help Trump. I mean, like, they hadn't done, they had, like, this was the like hours after the meeting where they decide to go do the intelligence analysis, they go tell all of the media that Trump was guilty because the Russians helped him. I mean, that is pretty sinister. And it's a little hard to believe, because the other thing people have to remember is that Obama prosecuted more leakers than, I think, I want to say, like the last, like, many multiples of presidents. I mean, Obama prosecuted a lot of people for leaking secrets. Was he even upset that somebody had leaked this incredibly important, secretive information about the intelligence? Apparently not. There's no evidence of any consequences for anybody. And I think that points to kind of the thing that I really think, because I think that the way we protect ourselves from a lawless intelligence community and a lawless CIA in the future is eternal vigilance. It's knowing what it's, I think I was gonna say, I think it's a lot less likely that dumb politicians will fall for sex blackmail operations again in the future. And I think people are much more skeptical when the intelligence community tells the New York Times things. I think a large percentage of the country is not going to believe it at all, and a larger percentage will be skeptical. But I think it's important to remember that, like, we keep focusing on the intelligence. All of that was just to run an information war against Trump. It was all aimed at reducing his legitimacy and credibility as a populist. And that trick, by the way, Sean, of basically painting your enemies as a puppet of Putin, and it was not new with Trump. It's been a strategy of CIA linked color revolution, regime change operations in Eastern Europe for decades. That's a big part of how you discredit your political enemies, is you associate them with Putin. So the significance of this episode is that it is truly the turning inward of the CIA's regime change, foreign government overthrow playbook against the American people and against a duly elected American president. And that has never happened before, at least as far as we know, and should continue to shock us, and should continue to, require us to demand more transparency and more reform.
We're heading into the weekend. If the Shellenbergers were having a big backyard barbecue, and your neighbor's going to walk up to you and say, Michael, I heard Tulsi Gabbard. I was at work. I didn't really understand what happened. Can you break this down for me in under 60 seconds? Should I care? Is this political talking points? What really happened? What do you tell them?
Yeah, I would say just that thing I just kind of ended with. I think the most important thing to know is that we now know for a fact that the CIA ran a disinformation operation to frame President Trump as a puppet of Putin, that they had the intelligence that disproved that. They hid that intelligence. They had a lot of intelligence that suggested that the Russians, in fact, did not favor either candidate. We have actually a fair amount of evidence that they may have favored Hillary because they knew her. They thought she was manageable. They thought they could control her. And that the whole painting, first of all, the whole painting of Trump as a Russian asset was always false, and the intelligence community knew that. They also knew that the Russians either didn't favor a candidate or favored Hillary, and that they also knew from the beginning, and this is, I think most people may know this, but that they could find no effect of any of this. They say, oh, well, the hacking of Hillary's emails in the DNC, you can't, there's no political scientist in America of any legitimacy that thinks that the election was influenced in that way. And yet you have Obama's director of national intelligence saying precisely that it did influence the election. So it is a straight up psychological operation, political warfare that we have allowed the CIA to conduct abroad for 80 years. And they did it against us and the American people. And even if you hate Trump with a passion, and because look, this was traditionally a left-wing concern. Intelligence community reform has traditionally been a Democrat concern. Even if you hate Trump with a passion, you should not want an intelligence community that is politicized and weaponized.
I want to end with something. As I said, you guys broke this. And you were critical in the Twitter files. You have built this massive platform. You've been an advocate of free speech in the academia world with your position at the University of Austin. You've testified in front of Congress. But on the issue of independent media, without voices like you and Matt Taibbi, we wouldn't know what we know now. As you look at the media landscape, how critical is independent media to the future? Because I feel like, with the exception of, I pointed a bunch of people to your work and to Matt Taibbi's in the last 48 hours and said, guys, if you want to understand it, don't listen to me. Go listen to these guys. Look at what they wrote in Substack and what they have. But you guys are islands out there. And if left to their own devices, I scan the newspapers every morning when I get coffee, and it's like they want to pretend it doesn't exist. So how critical is what independent media, not just what you do, to the future of this country and our democracy?
I mean, obviously, it's an amazing moment that you can have independent journalists like Matt Taibbi and Catherine Herridge and Mike Shellenberger that can actually make a living doing investigative journalism outside of the big papers. In some ways, the situation is worse than it was when you had big investigative staffs at the newspapers that actually did their job and held the intelligence community to account. On the other hand, I think it's always been, particular individual people have to go after the intelligence community in that way. As far as the media goes, it's the level of public support, the public trust in the media is like as low as it's ever been in recorded history. I think it's 31%. That's about the same percent that trust the Democratic Party right now. It's about the same amount of support for, that trust the intelligence community, that you go through the institutions of society. So I think the media is dying. I mean, obviously we're seeing that with, Stephen Colbert's, show being pulled. It had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with a $40 million deficit every year. I mean, that's extraordinary. I know for a fact that the traffic to the big newspapers from social media platforms is not down by half. It's down by more like 90% over the last 4 or 5 years. It's been a catastrophe for them. So I think it's an exciting time. It has a chance to be a golden age for journalism. I do think it's important that people pay for subscriptions, that they support independent media, because I personally don't want to have to get advertisers. I don't want to have to spend time with advertisers. Other people, they make it work. But I do think supporting this new ecosystem is essential because, look, I couldn't believe, I am sure that none of the mainstream news media that wrote about the release of this House intelligence report debunked the ICA. I'm confident none of them even read it. I mean, if you had actually, this is why I'm always like, just read it yourself. Like, you can just tell, like, you just see what total garbage we were fed in that initial 2017 report by reading that report that was released yesterday. Hopefully we can shine more of a light on it. But I do think, we do need to put the pressure on the Trump administration to just be making much more of this transparent and cleaning house.
All right. Well, we're going to put your site in the show notes. People go subscribe to it, because that's how we can do this. Let's vote with our wallets. Let's support the great work that Michael's doing. Subscribe to his stuff. This is the key. You got to pay for it somehow and kind of keep him engaged because he's doing such great work. Michael, thank you for being so generous with your time. Love your insights and keep up the great work.
Thanks for having me, Sean. I enjoyed talking with you.
You bet. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope you have a great weekend. Make sure, again, you hit that subscribe and notification button because we drop a video every weekend. Go to SeanSpicer.com to sign up for the free newsletter. Always feel free to join us at 6. Have a great weekend. We got a big week lined up for you next week. Take care. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.